I'm Lee Schneider, and this is the Future Lab. This season, I'm asking my guests about the state today of science fiction and fantasy writing and publishing. I'll interview your favorite authors, editors, publishers, and industry experts about writing and publishing the books you love to read. If you like what you hear, don't forget to give the show some stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And subscribe to my newsletter, 500 Words, to keep up with what I'm doing in writing and podcasting. Joining me today on the show is Julie Carrick Dalton, a New England-based author who is an environmental storyteller. Julie is the award-winning author of Waiting for the Night Song, which won the New Hampshire Writers Project People's Choice Award, and she also wrote The Last Beekeeper, which is a finalist for the Association for the Study of Literature and Environment Book Award. Her novels weave personal mysteries with urgent environmental themes. The result is a hopeful take on how we humans may cope with and even resolve the looming climate disaster facing us. Julie's third novel, The Forest Becomes Her, is set to publish in 2026. Please welcome Julie to the Future Lab. Julie, welcome to the podcast. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm excited for our conversation.
Now, nature is pretty much a character in your work. When reading The Last Beekeeper, I'm amazed at how deeply you feel nature. So this first question, though, is a bit large, but what is it about nature that makes you feature it so prominently in your books?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about that too, because I didn't start out thinking I want to be a nature writer. It's just how I wrote. I think it kind of goes back to my childhood. I was one of those kids that spent all my time playing in the woods, climbing trees, damming up creeks in the yard. And I think that's how I processed the world from a really young age. My grandparents had a farm in Western Maryland and in Appalachia, and I spent a lot of time there. And I think that was my first lens on the world, and that's how I think about it. I think I noticed a lot of things, like textures, smells, sounds. And so when I tell a story, those are that's the emotional lens my characters take on, because that's my lens.
Definitely. It's very rich environment, in a literary way, and also just helps me visualize where we are so thoroughly. Critics say your work is climate fiction. Do you accept the category?
I accept what anybody wants to call it. I never had heard the term climate fiction when I was writing my first novel, Waiting for the Night Song. And right after it was published, or when it was in the pipeline, someone along the line said, "Oh, you write climate fiction." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I have mixed feelings about it. I think that it sounds a lot like science fiction to people. And so when people say climate fiction, a lot of people are visualizing, like apocalyptic works, post-apocalyptic, climate ravaged landscapes and things like that, which I love books like that. That's not what I write. So, I have a love-hate relationship with the term climate fiction, because it is a category that's gaining momentum. More people understand what it is. And I think it's a very valid classification. I sometimes think, it's more of a category under other genres. Like you can have climate fiction in mystery. You can have climate fictions in young adult, or even in romance or thrillers or literary. So I like to think of it more as a subcategory, not a genre of its own, if that makes sense.
It seems, though, that it's an important time to be writing, whatever we want to call it, climate fiction, or writing in this genre or subgenre, because it seems to me one of the most important ways to get people to care about the earth and want to help and deal with the climate catastrophe that's soon to be upon us, or maybe already is, have people really understand what we might lose and what we might gain. Does any of that resonate with you? And would you use that in inspiring someone to write this in this genre?
Yeah. So that 100% sounds exactly like the way I think. So when I wrote The Last Beekeeper and I turned in the first draft to my editor, she sent me back a note and she said, "Julie, you write about bees the way some people write about, or talk about puppies. And she's like, you need to understand, not everybody thinks bees are adorable or amazing or, wants to like hug a bee the way they want to hug a puppy. And so she's like, you need to understand that not everybody feels this way. So I took that on as a challenge. That was my goal with writing The Last Beekeeper, was I wanted people to love bees. I wanted people to love them, to see them, to understand the impact they have on the world. I mean, if we lost all of our pollinators, bees are just one of the many pollinators, but if we lost them, we would lose a third of the food on planet Earth. So that's a big reason to care about the bees. But beyond that, I mean, they're amazing creatures, just inherently in their own right. Like, they're amazing mathematicians, and the geometry of a honeycomb is so precise. They have amazing GPS skills built into their little bodies. They just have these incredible qualities about them that I love. I'm a beekeeper, so to me, these things are really like amazing to me. But I had to wrap my mind around that other people don't feel that way. So I wanted to create a character in this book, Sasha, who so loved bees that she almost felt like she had this almost mystical connection to bees, that she was, one of them, or they understood her. So to give people a way to see the world through the eyes of someone who cared about the bees so much, not only because of the impact they'd have on our world, like if we lost a third of the food on the planet Earth, obviously that would change everything from food security to economics and politics. But I wanted my readers to love bees through Sasha's eyes, just because she loved bees, and to care about them as this integral part of nature that just deserved to exist in its own right. So that, I think, is maybe my mission in writing, is to make people fall in love and to truly value these things. Because if you love something and you value it, you want to protect it, save it, and make sure it's there for the next generation.
I noted in your acknowledgments that you stood up for the adorability of bees.
100%.
Not the last word in there on how adorable bees are.
They are.
Well, you certainly feel it in the book. So this is a corollary question. It's a bit of a balancing act, I think, in writing about a catastrophic future. This is 10 years past. The book takes place 10 years past a catastrophic event. And yet there's hope. The characters have hope. The characters, they're more than just muddling through, and they're more than just surviving. I wouldn't call this a survival story. And I've read other climate fiction books that are literally about people hanging on by their fingernails. This is not like that. This is about maybe coping and looking at a new reality. What's that balance like for you in writing it? I guess a dumb question would be, is it depressing? Is it edifying? What are you feeling as you're navigating this balance?
I think a lot of it comes down to hope. I have a lot of hope and optimism for the world, and I don't mean in a Pollyanna way that I think all of a sudden climate change is going to get better. I don't think that. But I have hope that we can live within it in some way. I think the reason I can have optimism and hope, and the reason my characters do, I think, is I do not expect us to go backward. I don't expect us ever to be the way we were pre-industrialization, pre-fossil fuels. I do think that we have the possibility of protecting as much as we can going forward. And I think we have the capacity to make changes that could affect our future. If I didn't have any hope, I wouldn't have anything to fight for. But I think that hope can have a lot of different definitions. Like, hope to me doesn't mean going back to the way it was. It doesn't even mean believing that things are going to stay the way they are now. It means loving what's left and protecting what is left, and doing the best we can for our future, and being willing to adapt, like understanding that things might not look the way in the future the way they are now, but that doesn't mean there's nothing left to love. Like, I've used this example before, but I think a lot about, like, an example of a hummingbird feeder. There's, a lot of people who love birds and are big bird watchers and put out a hummingbird feeder. My mother-in-law is big into her hummingbird feeder. If every year you had 20 or 30 hummingbirds, they come to your feeder every year, and you just love these hummingbirds, and you're so excited when they show up every year. And then one year you put it up and only 5 hummingbirds come back. The climate's changed, or their habitat has changed, or for whatever reason. You have some choices. You could give up and not put up the feeder anymore. You could be full of rage and anger at all the things that have happened that caused the collapse of these hummingbird this hummingbird population, or you could love the heck out of the 5 hummingbirds that are left. You could do everything you can to protect those 5 hummingbirds instead of looking back and being paralyzed by grief for the hummingbirds you lost. You can focus your energy on what is left and what is good. And there is so much good left. Like those 5 hummingbirds are amazing, beautiful creatures. So I think it's a choice we have to make of like not getting, absolutely there are things to grieve and things to be fearful of. Like I'm not ignoring them. But I don't, if we give into the paralysis of grief and fear and rage, we don't see those 5 hummingbirds that are still left and how amazing they are. And that's how I truly do think I walk through the world. Like I think I want to see all the good that's left and protect it. And I think it's a battle to fight against that tendency to lean into grief and rage.
That gives me a clue to the answer to my next question. Was I was thinking about the word that came to mind in the characters was stoicism, but I think I'm revising that a bit. You're a beekeeper, you farm. I imagined you know what these characters would go through. I'm reading the book and saying, oh my God, what if there's no Wi-Fi? It put me, in the beginning of the book, it was like, I'm a tech guy. I live in a tech world and I love nature and we're hikers and, this is something we're close to here in California. But at the same time, I was really examining where I was on that scale of grief, acceptance, even knowing what to do. These folks in the book, they occupy a very special place they're not really preppers, although maybe the previous generations were preppers. They're it's more than coping. So maybe you could help me out here about like, what is their attitude and what would be a productive attitude for people to have if we're 10 years after a major climate event like this?
Yeah. So in the book, the 4 main characters in the book, there's Sasha is the main character, and then she's these friends, Gino, Ian, and Hallie. And for the majority of the book in the adult timeline, they're squatting in this farmhouse, and they have no running water. They don't have, they're not hooked up to the grid. They don't have Wi-Fi. And for me, locating them in this kind of isolated place, and they're also not like in the middle of a neighborhood. They're kind of in this remote area that I stripped away all those conveniences you talk about. I took away the Wi-Fi. I took all that away from them, and that they have to kind of relearn how to live in the world because we don't know how to live in the world. If all those things were taken away from us, how would we, would you know how to get food? Would you know how to feed yourself or source water or, all these things that we as humans are so disconnected from now? So I wanted to remove all those barriers and put them in this, that they have shelter in this house, but everything else they have to source on their own. And it was actually really fun for me to write this because the farmhouse in the book is my grandparents' farmhouse. Like as I was writing it, I was walking through the rooms in their farmhouse on their property. And my grandparents' farmhouse was in this little corner of Maryland and Appalachia, out near West Virginia. And it never did have hot running water the whole time. They had an outhouse there until my father was 16. And even after they got a bathroom, it never had a shower or a bathtub. So my whole childhood, when I was at my grandparents', we had to heat water on a stove to fill a galvanized steel tub to take a bath. And we didn't have a telephone in the house. There was, it was heated by a wood stove. And so a lot of things were already stripped away from in that house in my memory. And so it was very easy to build on that. Now my parents and my grandparents farmed. So I have a lot of knowledge, and I also farmed, have knowledge about plants and, things you can preserve and how to, I like to cook and I like to grow and cook food that I grow. So I did have a lot of generational knowledge on how to do this. I don't think a lot of people do have the ability to forage food and find food in the woods or, in fields to feed themselves in a crisis. So for me, it was really fun to inhabit these characters and let them loose in this wild space and kind of imagine how would I survive? How would I feed myself? And that to me was almost like a game. How would they get food? Where would they forage? How would they get water? How would they? It's kind of like it was almost like a survival game in my mind I was playing as I let them, kind of live it. I didn't know how they were going to do it when I started the book. It was kind of this process of trial and error to see how they could survive.
Do you think people need to recapture some of those skills? Is it going to be necessary?
I think if I said I thought it was going to be necessary, that's implying I think there's going to be some big apocalyptic event. I think it would be wonderful if people were more connected to where their food came from. And when you buy things in the grocery store, they're usually coming from thousands of miles away in another country. I think it would be nice to think more about how local our food was, how to grow your own food, and how hard it is to grow food and to sustain yourself, and to appreciate how, I mean, I know food prices are more expensive than they have been historically, but how relatively inexpensive it is to have such a wide variety of food. And that's not how the world has been, for most of human history, to have access to all this food all year round. I think it's important. I don't want to say I think everybody needs to go out and start, living off the grid and learning how to farm, but I think we should at least have an awareness of where the food is coming from and how precious it is that we have running water that's potable. I just don't think we have an awareness of it because we all grew up in a world where we didn't have to think about it. We all grew up in the grocery store and with, running water that had fluoride and everything in it, that we didn't have to think about these things because it was provided for us. So I don't want to say I think it's going to be necessary in the near future, but it certainly wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, I agree totally with that. I was walking my 13-year-old son to school yesterday, and we were talking about the book, and I was talking about a catastrophic network failure, and he interrupted me and said, that's not going to happen. This is his view, just out of interest, the 13-year-old view. That's not going to happen because the people who control those networks are very wealthy. They make too much money off those networks and off the people who use those networks. So they're just not going to let that thing go down. And I tried to argue with him, and we ran out of time before we made it to school. But that generation, at least, they just believe in that everything's going to still be here, even if things, and he's a reader of Neil Shusterman and much dystopian fiction. So it's in his mind.
Yeah. I mean, food security is, you don't think of food security as a direct link to technology. But if we, lost, a third to half of the food, and that would exacerbate all the inequalities that exist on Earth and the ripple effect. That's what this book really is. It's imagining the ripple effect of the loss of our pollinators. First, it's big agriculture, it's food security, it's, economics, it's, employment. Then it's housing, it's politics, it's global politics. Would countries go to war over food security? And those things, that would unhinge everything. If global food security went into crisis, the, technology is at risk too, because all of this is sustained at some level by humans at some point. And, we rely on, our food and water supplies. So we are more vulnerable than we want to think we are. It's nice to think we can't be vulnerable, but we are.
Yeah, well, definitely. An example for me was a few years ago during the pandemic, everything closed here, but the restaurant across the street opened up, and the executive chef out of that restaurant sold out of his pantry what he had.
Wow.
He opened like a impromptu store. And that made me realize, first of all, how generous and valuable that was, but also my dependency on supply chain issues and things I hadn't even thought about. Like, what if you can't go out, you can't go into a large big box store to buy stuff.
Yeah.
So that really woke me up to that. I wanted to bring up a very real sub-thread in the book, which is the way governments manipulate information about the environment that is to their benefit to manipulate, or it's a power grab. We're seeing that now. We're seeing websites being shut down. We're seeing efforts to stop, wind farms. We're seeing EV rebate programs shut down. There's all this manipulation and a lot of misinformation. Do you think novels can help? Or should we be doing things like putting up alternative websites, like some people are doing, capturing all the information from scientists and putting it up on a website? What should be done about this?
All of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that my job as a storyteller is to tell these stories. My hope is that when people read my work, that something in it's going to resonate, that they're going to see reflections or echoes of our real world in these books. Like, are you familiar with Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
So if you remember, there's a character named Octavia in my book. She is Octavia Butler. I didn't just name her after Octavia Butler. Like, she is.
Ding. Yeah. Light bulb
yes,
goes on.
I actually just flung her into the future and plunked her down the book because she's a real inspiration to me. Now, she wrote that book in 1993. The book is set in the years between 2024 and 27. So we, right now, are the people that Octavia Butler was dreaming of. And she put us in this world where California is burning. We have this super conservative government that's, I think she uses the line, "Make America Great Again" in the book. Does. It was prescient. Now, maybe we should have listened to Octavia Butler back in 1993, right? So I think novelists have an eye towards the future. Jeff Vandermeer, the author who wrote Annihilation, among other things, he once said, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it was something to the effect of he thinks of his novels as laboratories for climate futures. So what he's saying is that his novels are a laboratory where he gets to play out a scenario of what a future might look like. And that's what I think all novels do. They play out a way the world might be and shows you all the intricacies, all the emotional, impacts of decisions, societal impacts of, decisions or indecision or misinformation. And then we get to see what it looks like. And do we like it? Like, is that the world we want to live into? And if it's not, what are we going to do about it? So that's my job as a storyteller, is to tell these stories and maybe expose these possible climate futures to readers so they can see themselves. How would they live in that future? And if they don't want to live into that future, what are they going to do about it now? I'm not the one that's going to be putting up these alternative websites because that's not an area of my expertise, but somebody that is their area of expertise. Somebody is a climatologist that has this information. There are people in every field, like you name it. There is something you can do. If you work in construction, you can speak up about the sustainability of the materials and the sourcing of materials. If you work as a receptionist in the doctor's office, you can speak up about how you're using materials and water use, or, how the distance of the things that you're purchasing for the office, how far they're traveling to get. There's a role. So when you say, should we be doing this or this? It's like we should be doing all of it. And I think that people can look in their own sphere of influence of whatever it is, like you're doing. Like you are sharing stories, spreading information, asking questions, and bringing insights into people's homes to listen to and to think about, that we all have a role in there, and to look at what is your sphere of influence. And how can you make an impact in that sphere? It doesn't mean not everybody has to be standing on the State House steps with a microphone. Not everybody needs to be a scientist, and not everybody needs to be writing novels. But we all have a sphere of influence within whatever chosen career or community we're in, and we can exercise our power there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the framework of that gets me thinking. I think about the phrase "nature always wins" and how it really made me consider, okay, what are the solutions to this? And do they involve cooperating with nature, understanding what nature is and does, or do they involve technological solutions that kind of bend nature? A lot of the problem of human activity on Earth has been we've been beating up nature. We haven't been a very good partner to nature. And what your book got me thinking about is that, nature is pretty powerful, and there could be some, let's call it whiplash maybe, or a correction that doesn't create an environment that we humans think is so terrific. So how are we going to deal with that? And that's kind of an extra human way of thinking about the whole issue.
Yeah. So, Richard Powers, he wrote Bewilderment, The Overstory, and Playground. There's an article, an interview with him in the New York Times, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. And the interviewer said something to him like, you seem to have so much optimism and hope despite all this doom and gloom with the climate. And he's like, oh, I have so much hope. The Earth is going to be fine. I mean, we won't be here. But Earth is going to be fine. Nature is going to be fine. So it's like there's layers of what how I said earlier, it's how do you define hope? Mm-hmm. Is it hope for the planet? Is it hope for the humans on the Earth? Is it hope for individual humans? There's a different ways to frame hope. But I think it depends on, I think for planet Earth, Earth's going to be fine. It's going to purge us if it needs to, and we won't be here. And it's going to reclaim. There's a wonderful book that came out, I believe in maybe April, by an author named Tim Weed, and it's called The Afterlife Project. And in it, it has some time travel elements that project what the Earth is going to look like in 10,000 years, post-humans. It's a really beautiful book. It's a really a beautiful meditation on nature and our interaction with nature. But so I agree with Tim Weed's vision of the future and Richard Powers that Earth's going to be just fine without us. But I also would like to stick around. I would like my grandchildren to be around. And so I have fear for future generations, or I worry about the quality of life and how we're going to adapt. But then on a lower level, I have hope for like the human spirit to adapt and make good decisions. I think that technology to me, and again, I'm not an engineer, I'm not an entrepreneur. Technology, I don't think is what's going to get us out of it. I think it's making decisions that are going to, that we're not making about, fossil fuel use, about regulations. I don't think it's great to make decisions on a personal level, to recycle, to, make small things. I think that's very powerful, and it's important to see people doing it. But I think we need more institutional changes. We need more legislation, regulation, international agreements. That's how we're going to, avoid these tipping points that we're heading towards. So I have like macro level, I have hope for the planet. I have fear for future generations. And I have hope again for where we are right now, that we still have the capacity to avert the worst. I do not think we're going to go back. Like I don't hope for that, but I do think we still have time to make meaningful decisions if we can get our act together, which that's the challenge in front of us, which is why I think that everybody needs to be looking at what they're, where they are in the world and their sphere of influence, and what could they do to influence others, to speak up, to engage in conversations.
When people say we have to save the planet, I often respond just as you said, well, the planet's going to be fine.
It's going to be just
humans?
fine.
Yeah, what about humans,
Yeah, and I think, you asked about the technology and adapting thing. Like we do a lot of things that I think are really counterproductive, but I understand on a human level why we do them. Do we want to give up on New Orleans and Florida? Like, I don't want to say like, your home's not worth saving. But then I look at it logically, and I look at the maps, and I look at the projections of the sea level rising in communities in Florida. And, I'm from Maryland. There are communities on the eastern shore of Maryland that I'm like, these aren't going to survive. And putting money and resources into barrier walls that are maybe going to last a decade or two, is that a good use of resources? And when we could be moving inland and thinking more logically about adapting to the future. On the other side of that, I very much understand the emotional history involved in like, how do we give up on an entire community? So I don't have the answer to that. Those are things that are really challenging if you live in a place like that. But I think it's counterproductive to put billions of dollars into technology that ultimately is going to fail. At some point in the future, it's not going to survive. So I think technology can't be our savior. I think we need to be thinking about adaptability, about choosing to live in places and in ways that are going to be in harmony with the future nature, not the past nature. And they're not the same.
What can you tell us about your third novel, The Forest Becomes Her, which is coming out next year? And you don't have to give any spoilers, but what are we going to look forward to there?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this book. I love all my books. I love all my children. But I think this is like my book. I think this is the book that's most personal, most like intimately more of me in this book. And it's about a piece of land in Concord, Massachusetts, which is I live in Boston, Massachusetts, so it's not far away. It's historically the home of like Emerson, Thoreau, Louisa May Alcott. The Revolutionary War started there. It's got a lot of history tied up, and it's also a very progressive liberal city that prides itself on conservation and environmental activism. So in this book, there's a piece of land in Concord, a centuries-old growth forest that's clear-cut to build housing development. And it's about three women who are multi-generational. One's 13, one's in her 30s, and one's in her mid-50s that are living on this land that's been clear-cut for this new housing development. And that they all, for different reasons, which I won't tell you, have an emotional attachment to this piece of land. And maybe or maybe not, are being haunted by the forest, whether it's in their heads in a trauma reaction, or whether it's real. You'll have to figure that out. But that they're drawn to this piece of land and to the grief that the land is experiencing. And it's really kind of a metaphor for what a community loses when a forest disappears. Beyond just that the trees are pretty, but all the things that it holds together under the soil, and emotionally for a community. And the reason I said it in Concord, Massachusetts is because Walden Woods is in Concord, Massachusetts. It's a very beloved American forest. That's not the forest I cut down, but that Concord is a place that a lot of people would say that would never happen. That would never happen in Concord, Massachusetts. So I made it happen in Concord, Massachusetts, because if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. And it's really about our attachment and our connection to the land we live on, and what we lose as a society and a community when we lose a piece of nature. And I think you can extrapolate that to the whole world, but it's not like this microcosm of Concord, Massachusetts.
So we'll look forward to that coming out next year. I'm curious, what does your workspace, your writing space look like?
Right now I live in an apartment in downtown Boston. And so I'm in my son's bedroom. And I write in his room when he's at college. So that wall behind us with all my bookshelves, that's actually a Murphy bed. That wall spins around. And when my son comes home from college, this becomes his bedroom. And then I'm at the kitchen counter. So I'm quite flexible, but I am very fortunate that we have a family home in New Hampshire. And that's where I've was farmed, and I have extensive gardens, and I'm much more out in nature, that we spend a lot of the summer in New Hampshire. And I have a little tiny one-room writing cabin, in our yard. And it was built out of an old barn that was torn down. And it's just old wood. You can kind of feel it and smell it. And it's just one little room, and it's surrounded by woods. And that is where I feel most writerly, I guess. I write at the desk that my grandfather built, sitting in the chair that was my grandmother's when she was a school teacher. It feels like a room full of history, not only in the furniture and the decorations in it, but in the wood, this old barn that I don't know anything about it, but there's history in the beams so that to me is where I love to write most.
Wonderful. This is my wide angle question. What do you think is the state of publishing and writing today?
Wow, that's a loaded question. It is a really shifting landscape. Even I've only been in the publishing world. I signed a contract for my first book in 2019. It came out in 2021. So I'm still relatively new to this. But even since I joined, the industry has changed a lot. It seems like there are a lot of novels being published every year, but more of them are coming out from smaller and independent presses, self-publishing. There's just a lot of quiet noise and a lot of small books, and publishers seem to be anointing the big books with all the advertising. The Stephen Kings and Kristen Hanna and people that are household names are taking a larger share. And I don't mean that against them personally. Their books are great, which is why people want to buy them. But the publishing houses are, in general, often pushing their, the chosen children of the season. And then the rest of the books have to kind of fight for the little bits and pieces. And I don't think it was always, it was to a degree other ways, but I think it's getting a little bit more separation between the big books and all the other books that are kind of fighting. It's hard to be a mid-list author right now. But I also feel really lucky to be part of this world. Like, I wouldn't trade this for anything. I love being an author. I'm a professor. I teach at Drexel University, and I lecture at a lot of other universities. I travel and do a lot of public speaking, and I wouldn't trade this for anything. As frustrating as it can be sometimes trying to market your work, I wish I could just write my work, sit in my little writing cabin, write it, and then just email it, and then just go back, start the next book. But I have to be a marketer. I have to be a publicist. I have to, I actually really enjoy doing podcasts like this. But it's part of my job now, is to get out there and market myself and tell people about my books. I wish that wasn't part of my job, that I needed to market myself. That said, I feel very lucky. I'm with my new book's coming out from St. Martin's Press, and I'm really excited to be working with them. They have a really great team there. So, I just write the very best book I can and try to step out into the world as best I can and represent the book and cross my fingers, because there's always a lot of luck. You do your best work and you try to be the best person you can, best literary citizen in the world you can, and then toss it out in the world and cross your fingers.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to The Future Lab. If you like this episode, please head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube and give us a like and a positive comment. It sounds like a small thing, but it makes a big difference in helping more people discover the show. You can find out more about my books at my author's website, leeschneiderbooks.com. We'll see you next time. I'm Lee Schneider.